Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to see all of you here in the sanctuary. It's wonderful to see all of you who are viewing this from wherever you are, your home or someplace else. I wanted to ask first our tech folks, I didn't hear the recording announcement start. Are we recording? We are recording. Okay, great. That's terrific. Well, welcome. It is wonderful to be back in the sanctuary with all of you. Excuse me. And it is wonderful to have all of you who are viewing us remotely via Zoom. 9:30, it's a different time, and maybe some more people will be joining us at 10. Who knows? Till we get used to this return to our regular service times. I am very pleased to be leading worship today with Chrissy Bushyager, our Director of Religious Education, and Bob Rowland, our Music Director, behind in his little sound booth over there, protecting himself and protecting all of us. So, hi, Bob. I'll say hi to Bob. And let's, here in the sanctuary, say hi to the people at home. That's a camera there. You can wave and say hi to folks. I want to also thank our hospitality team this morning for being here to greet us warmly on this cold day, as well as our tech team. We have Don Sloat, Skip Seeloss, and Rob Sartain running our tech this morning, and we're grateful for that. Chrissy, do you have before I ask you to come up, I want to remind people this is a new month. We have a new spiritual theme for our Soul Matters program. That theme is Widening the Circle. So throughout the month, both in our Soul Matters groups and here in the sanctuary in our worship, we are going to be looking at what it means to widen the circle. Chrissy, you want to come up and fill us in on some other things?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I want to remind people at home that there's captioning available if you hit the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. And also after the service, you can stay for virtual coffee hour. That will be, you'll be put in a breakout room to have a little chat session with a couple other friends. So please make use of that. I want to give an update on religious education because for the past couple weeks I've been asking people to volunteer in RE. We're going to be starting our religious education back in person for our preschool through 7th, 8th graders starting next Sunday. Yay! And we had a wonderful teacher training yesterday. It went great. We have most of the people we need, but we need about 3 more. So if you're on the fence, please come and join. We have a wonderful group of people. Everyone was super excited. And this is the way, our theme in RE this year is reconnection. And a lot of people talked yesterday about how volunteering in RE is a way that they are reconnecting with their church community after this time that we felt kind of apart. So if you want to get in on that reconnection, I really encourage you to do it because it's such a wonderful way to connect with the children in our church, with other adults in our church. It's a really wonderful thing. So if you want to do that, come see me, email me after the service. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. So religious education programming for our youngest members begins next week. It is an exciting step to returning to some semblance of normalcy here at UUCDC. So let us now begin our worship. Let us begin our worship with song. Bob is going to play our opening hymn. For those of you who are at home or viewing remotely, we invite you to sing along. The words are in your worship program. For those here in the sanctuary, we're still not singing yet in the sanctuary, so enjoy Bob's singing.
Love that comes to life, where words of freedom
Please join me as we recite our covenant. Enriched by our differences and joined together in our search for meaning, we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in a spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others with a joyful heart.
And now, because it's his birthday today, I'm going to invite Russ Lorraine to come up and light our chalice. Russ, would you like to come up and light our chalice for us? Happy birthday, Russ. Over here. So I found this out by looking at the chat on the Zoom where Russ's wife, Rebecca, is on and said, make sure to wish Russ a happy birthday today. So as Russ lights our chalice, I give you these words from the Reverend David Breeden, who's the senior minister of the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. We gather into this circle. We gather into this circle of care to dream, to envision, to embody and achieve the compassion we dream, the justice we envision, the dignity of each in an ever-growing circle of love and justice. And now we are going to enjoy our centering song. We have switched up our centering song. We're going back to the loving kindness meditation. Today, Bob is going to play it live, and we'll have the visual to enjoy. Thank you, Bob. Now is the time in our service where we share the joys and sorrows of our lives, the ups and downs of our daily living, those things that are on our heart today, whether they be lifting us up or weighing us down. If you're with us remotely, you can put your joy or sorrow in the chat. For those here in the sanctuary, I invite you to drop a stone into the bowl of water. The stone represents the joy or sorrow that you are carrying. The water represents this community. And just as the stone is surrounded by that water, so will you, the person who drops that stone, be held by this community. I invite you to do so by forming a queue up to this side of the sanctuary and then exiting back this way. All are invited. and I'm going to drop 3 stones. The first represents the joys and sorrows of those who are with us remotely, who've listed their joys and sorrows on the chat. The second is for those members of our community who are not here in the sanctuary or on chat today, but who have joys and sorrows of their own. And the third is for Cheryl Schlenker, who is in the hospital. Cheryl had abdominal surgery earlier this week. She's recovering well and hopes to be home Tuesday. So let us all send good wishes to Cheryl. Please join me now in a time of prayer. Spirit of life and love, great and gracious God, deep and abiding mystery that knows no name. In this moment in which we can be together once again, be together in person, be together online, let us hold each other in loving kindness. Let us feel the presence and the warmth of one another as we reach out, as we open our hearts, as we pray for those who are hurting and those who are joyful today. It has been a long, hard road, and we know it is not over yet, but we see glimmers of hope, signs of returning to life, an early spring perhaps, a spring of our spirits, that we may recover from this long, long nightmare. And in the midst of hope, let us recognize the pain of death of more than 900,000 of our fellow citizens over the past 2 years. And we know how that is multiplied for every death as someone connected to it. Let us be thankful for vaccinations and boosters. Let us be thankful for frontline medical workers and those who have steadfastly served us through this pandemic. Let us offer up our healing thoughts for all those who are hurting, and let us feel the love and joy of those who celebrate. This is the time in which to be connected to one another. And let us, as always, pray for peace. And right now, as peace appears to be threatened in the Ukraine, let us pray that cooler heads will prevail and that war may be avoided. Let us be instruments of peace. Let us be peace. Let us make peace in all our relationships. We offer up all these prayers in the name of all that is holy and in all the holy names. Amen. And now we will sing our prayer together that we sing each week. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit if you're here in the sanctuary, and you can do this at home as well. We have motions that we do as we sing Spirit of Life. We won't sing in the sanctuary, but we'll move. If you're here remotely, feel free to sing away. We start with the Spirit of Life, our chalice flame. Thank you. You may be seated. And we thank the choir, the UUCDC virtual choir, for the gift of their music today. And Melissa Ned's our member who came up with those motions for us. And now we will take time in our service to receive your generous offerings to support this church and its work in the world. We do this virtually as we've been doing it for the past couple of years. You'll see on your screen, on the screens here in the sanctuary and at home, how to text using your smartphone, how to text your contribution to support this church and all its good works. We thank you for your generous support. If you are here in the sanctuary and you want to leave a check, we do have a couple of boxes in the back by the doors that you can drop your check on the way out. Thank you again for your generosity.
Thank you, Bob. So I am going to tell us a folk tale from Taiwan this morning, and I'm going to need your help to tell it. You can do this here in the sanctuary, you can do it from home. You have one line, you're going to say it a couple times. Your line is, "It's not my problem." And so when I do this, you're going to say, "It's not my problem." But I want you to say it with a little bit of attitude, like, "It's not my problem. It's not my problem." Something like that. So let's try it again. "It's not my problem." Very good. You're very good at this. All right. Once upon a time, there was a queen. She was sitting on her balcony with one of her trusted advisors. They were out there eating breakfast, looking out over the town. Townspeople were milling about. The baker was setting up her shop. All that was going on. She was gesturing out into something that was going on, making a point with her hands, and a little drop of honey fell off of the rice cake that she was eating. The little drop of honey fell onto the railing of the balcony. And the advisor said to the queen, "My queen, should I call a servant to clean up this little drop of honey?" And the queen said, "It is just a little drop of honey. It is not my problem. Someone else will deal with it." So a little bit of time passed, the sun rose, the balcony railing got a little warmer, and that drop of honey slid off the railing onto the ground below. The advisor said to the queen, "My queen, the drop of honey has fallen to the ground and it is attracting flies. Surely now we should call someone to clean it up." And the queen said, "A little bit of honey and a couple of flies are not my problem. Someone else will deal with it." So a lizard who was living in the dark cracks in the wall of the palace came scooting over to take care of those flies. That was going to be his breakfast that morning. But then the cat who lived in the bakery saw the lizard and came over and started batting it around like a toy. The dog who lived in the butcher shop saw the cat and came running over and started to bat the cat around like a toy. The advisor said to the queen, "My queen, the animals are fighting right where that drop of honey dropped. Maybe we should send someone to take care of the animals." The queen said, sighing deeply, "A few animals fighting in the street is not my problem. Someone else will deal with it." Well, someone else did deal with it because the baker saw that her cat was being attacked by a dog, and she came running out of that bakery with her rolling pin in her hand, ready to go after that dog. The butcher heard his dog yelping in pain and surprise, and he came running out of the butcher shop with his broom, ready to take care of the baker. Oh no. Now there was a fight happening in the street. The townspeople started to take sides. Some of them fought for the baker, some of them fought for the butcher, and soon everyone was fighting. The army came and they started to take sides and they were fighting. There was people were throwing rocks, the windows were broken, carts were overturned, and at some point, whether someone threw it or it just fell, there was a torch that fell or was thrown and started a fire. And pretty soon, there was a ladder up against the balcony, and the queen and her advisor were being rescued because the palace was in flames. A little later that day, when the flames had been put out, the queen and her advisor came back to that spot, just where her balcony used to stand. She looked where that honey had fallen earlier, and she thought to herself, if I had just taken care of it when it fell, I would not find my kingdom in ruins and my palace destroyed. That was the last day that the queen ever said, "It's not my problem." Thank you for listening to my story today.
Thank you to our UUCDC virtual choir for that rendition of Draw the Circle, and to Bob for helping to put it together. Bob, was that one of the compilations that the choir does separately, or was that? Yeah, so if you don't know this, the choir has, for most of the past 2 years, been singing solo to themselves into a recording and then sending it to Bob, and Bob puts them all together so it sounds like they're all singing together. It's just an amazing accomplishment, and for both the singers and for Bob for compiling it. So thank you, Bob, and thank you to the choir. I want to offer something of a disclaimer and perhaps issue a warning before I begin my reflection today. It is not yet illegal in Pennsylvania to talk about what I'm about to talk about, but it could be soon. And were I a teacher and not a preacher, and were we in one of those states where it has been banned, to talk about what I'm going to talk about could risk my school's budget and my very livelihood. Because 9 states have already banned the teaching or even the mention of critical race theory by anyone employed by a school or agency that receives public funding. And 19 other states, including Pennsylvania, have introduced bills that would do the same. House Bill 1532, co-sponsored by 32 Republican legislators in Harrisburg, has been referred to the Education Committee for review and recommendation. If it becomes law, it will prohibit any school district or any agency that receives public funding from even mentioning, even in passing, the things that I'm going to talk about today. The only thing that could stop this bill from happening will be the person who occupies the governor's mansion in Harrisburg. So let's remember, every vote counts. So what does critical race theory have to do with this month's Soul Matters theme of widening the circle? When we think of widening the circle, what often comes to mind is making our community, and more specifically our church community, more inclusive and diverse. In fact, right now we have a group of people, a task force, that is reviewing the contents of a UUA report on diversity and inclusion in our churches. And the name of that report is Widening the Circle of Concern. You'll be hearing much more from that task force in months to come. But today I want to look at a very specific issue that extends beyond the walls of the church and who we include and exclude, either intentionally or unwittingly. And that is the wealth gap in our nation, the wealth gap. Because the chasm between the haves and the have-lesses in our country is widening at an alarming rate, and that gap falls largely along racial lines. It is time that we, as a people of faith, see this and name it for what it is, a vestige of the systemic racism in our nation's history that dates back to before its founding and that continues, albeit in more subtle and perhaps nefarious ways, today. I don't want us to get too bogged down in statistics, but we need to face a few facts to understand the wealth gap that I'm talking about and its magnitude. According to a report by the Brookings Institution, median white household income, median white household net worth in the United States is $171,000. Median black household wealth is a paltry $17,100. So that means the median white household has a net worth 10 times that of the median black household in America. If black households held a share of the national wealth in proportion to their share of the U.S. population, it would amount to $12.68 trillion in household wealth, rather than the actual sum of $2.4 trillion. This means that the racial wealth gap is more than $10 trillion in our nation. Listen to this disparity. This knocked my socks off. The 400 richest Americans in the United States, the 400 richest individuals get this, the 400 richest individual have more total wealth than all of the black American households in the country. 400 individuals have more wealth than all of the African American families in this country. Here's one more statistic. On average, white college graduates have over 7 times more wealth than black college graduates. And black families whose heads graduated from college have about 33% less wealth than white families whose heads dropped out of high school. Let me say that again. Black families whose heads graduated from college have about 33% less wealth than white families whose heads dropped out of high school. The pull yourself up by your bootstraps crowd would have you believe that the wealth gap is a result of laziness, large family size, lack of education, and other aspects of personal responsibility. And here's where that disclaimer and that warning come into play that I offered just a minute ago, because I'm here to tell you that this is a false, demeaning, and dangerous narrative that's being put out there. According to many sources, including the Brookings Institution, the wealth gap is not the result of some individual choices that individual African Americans make or have made. The wealth gap is the result of nearly 250 years of slavery, followed by a century of Jim Crow segregation and economic exploitation reinforced by state-sanctioned violence. Even 20th century public assistance programs like FDR's New Deal and the GI Bill were applied discriminately and to the detriment of black Americans. Just one example of this. Did you know that the Social Security system, that great safety net, which also serves as a source of the creation of intergenerational wealth, intentionally excluded domestic and farm workers, the vast majority of whom were African Americans? So Social Security didn't apply to them. And we won't even get into redlining and all the ways that black families have been denied the opportunity to create wealth through home ownership. In his compelling Atlantic magazine article in 2014, which I highly recommend to all of you, writer Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote this: "Perhaps no statistic better illustrates the enduring legacy of our country's shameful history of treating black people as sub-citizens, sub-Americans, and sub-humans than the wealth gap." So how do we widen the circle of wealth in our country? Widen it until, as our opening hymn said, it includes and embraces all the living. There are 2 economic strategies that would have a tremendous impact. The first is to raise the minimum wage. You're probably aware that the federal minimum wage, which the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania tracks, has been stuck at $7.25 an hour, $7.25 an hour for nearly 15 years. Over that same period of time, the cost of goods has risen by nearly 30%, and the average price of a home has increased by more than 40%. There are approximately 1.4 million workers in the U.S. who are paid at or below the minimum wage. And while the majority of them are white, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour or even $19 an hour would, like the tide, lift all boats. Raising the minimum wage would inject substantial capital into our economic engine and raise the quality of life for all low-income Americans. The fight to raise the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania is a major focus of UU Justice PA, and our own Martis Leeper leads the working group for this statewide effort focusing on that issue. I'm sure she'd be happy to tell you more about the group's work and to have you join them. The second, and admittedly more complex and costly way to close the wealth gap is through reparations. Through reparations. Now, I want to share with you a little bit about my own journey on this topic of reparations. Back about 20 years ago, when I first heard this concept being proposed of paying reparations to African American families, whose ancestors were enslaved, I was like the queen in the story Chrissy told a few minutes ago. It's not my problem, I thought. I don't have any slaveholders in my family tree. I didn't do anything to harm these people. So why should I dig into my own pocket in the form of paying higher taxes to compensate them for the injuries inflicted on their ancestors? And then I began to think about the fact that although my mother's families were French and came to the U.S. in the late 19th century, my maternal great-grandfather was an artist and a sculptor whose patrons included names like Astor and Morgan and Vanderbilt. And I thought about upon whose backs their fortunes were built. And then I thought about my father's side of the family, French Canadians who settled in Rhode Island. My father's father and some who came before him worked in the textile business. Wool mostly, but cotton too. And of course, we know where the cotton came from, started from, before it made it to New England. So I realized that while I am not an heir to a southern plantation, my hands aren't exactly clean. And I would bet that every single one of us white Americans, if we were courageous enough to search, could find some branch of our family tree that benefited either directly or indirectly from the institution of slavery and the systemic racism that drove this country's economic engine. To say it's not my problem is simply to admit that we haven't looked hard enough. We all have an economic and a moral debt to pay, and that bill is long past due. What those reparations would look like is beyond the scope of what I can offer today. Books have been written and are being written about it, and economists are debating it in the literature. But what I want to focus on is the opportunity that entering into the debate presents to us. To consider reparations is to commit to doing some serious soul searching, to take a fierce accounting of our moral inventory, to use a phrase from the 12-step programs, to critically examine the ways that we white Americans have benefited from an immoral and violent system. The key question we must ask ourselves regarding reparations isn't, can we afford it? It's, why must we? Going back to that Atlantic magazine article, Ta-Nehisi Coates puts it this way, and I'm going to quote him at length here for a moment. He writes, "What I'm talking about is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. Reparations would mean the end of scarfing hot dogs on the 4th of July while denying the facts of our heritage. Reparations would mean the end of yelling patriotism while waving a Confederate flag. Reparations, he said, would mean a revolution of the American consciousness, a reconciling of our self-image as the great democratizer with the facts of our history." As white Americans, especially as middle and upper class, well-educated and home-owning white Americans, when we think of widening the circle, of inviting others in, of becoming a more diverse and inclusive community and country, we must recognize and reckon with the unfair advantages we were accidentally born into and the price that Black Americans have paid for our good fortune. Let us remember, especially this month, but every month, that Black history is our history. We gotta own it, folks. Let us face the violent and bloody truth of it, and let us, through our moral reckoning and a system of reparations, seek to heal the deep wounds that still fester in our society. Draw the circle. Draw the circle wide. Draw it wider still. Let this be our guide. No one stands alone. May it be so. Blessed be. Chrissy, will you extinguish the chalice for us? I invite you to say the words on the screen together as we extinguish our chalice and those at home extinguish theirs. Although we now extinguish our chalice flame, may we hold its warmth in our hearts in all the days ahead. Thank you all for being here today for the service. Thank you for being online. Thank you to our hospitality team and our online host, Rich Carencross. Thank you to our tech team for running the slideshow today and running Zoom. We appreciate you all being here in this precious time together. If you are joining us online, I remind you to stay online if you'd like to be in a breakout group. Unfortunately, we are discouraging socializing here in the sanctuary and in the church building, so we ask you to leave promptly, but it's been wonderful to see all of you here today. Just one quick announcement. We have started our program, our book drive for Chester Eastside. There are instructions on the website on how you can contribute to support. We're buying books for the kids who participate in their after-school program, and that program is going to be going on this week and next. So I encourage you to go to the website and find out how you can support it. Thank you for your support of that. And now I'd invite you all to rise in body or in spirit for those here in the sanctuary. And for those at home, if you'd like to, raise hands for your virtual hand holding for our benediction. If you're comfortable holding hands with a neighbor here in the sanctuary, feel free to do that. Let's say these words together. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life
And for those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Blessed be.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.